We've had you on the podcast a couple of times, and I guess, opened our eyes to rent vesting. I still remember after the first episode, we were very excited about the concept.
And then we went.
Neither
and
of us
bought.
did it. Yeah,
And then you went and bought it. I remember when I came in for the second one, you guys told me. I was like, what?
but we thought it would be a good chance to revisit rent vesting.
Okay.
And then we also get heaps of questions about equity recycling.
Cool.
So we
Sweet.
want to ask our resident property expert what the go is there. And then finally, we want to talk about just what's happening in property, where the market is going, interest rates, all the good stuff that people love.
Perfect, man.
But let's start with rent vesting.
Yes.
And for people who are new to the concept, what is it?
So rent vesting in a nutshell is renting where you want to live, or renting instead of owning, and then using the additional serviceability that you have from renting instead of owning to then go and invest. So essentially you're renting at the same time that you're investing. If people make the decision to buy where they want to live, it's a very, very expensive thing, right? Because obviously where you want to live is typically somewhere quite nice, and the cost to live there is very expensive. When you conversely look at how much rents are in the area compared to that mortgage cost, it's typically a significantly smaller amount. The caveat on this is if you're in an area that might be in the sub $1 million bracket, because a lot of locations in Australia, if you're talking $600,000, $700,000, $900,000, something like that, your rent's quite similar as a dollar value, maybe $600, $700, $900 a week. The ratio doesn't really work so much on that end. It still works, but the serviceability isn't huge. But when you start talking about like a $1.5, $2 million plus sort of market, the rental rates in those areas are so small compared to what the mortgage cost is per week, per month, that there's a huge imbalance. And like for most capital cities now, that's kind of like a nice place to live in most capital cities is around that price point. So that additional leftover, essentially borrowing capacity or serviceability left over from renting in those areas as opposed to buying there, leaves a lot of additional borrowing to then be able to go out and build a portfolio.
Yeah, so, in Sydney, your mortgage repayments might be $1,000 a week and you might be renting for $500, $600 a week.
Yeah.
And you can use that difference to then invest somewhere else.
Yes.
You were saying earlier you actually ran the numbers to give us a worked example.
I did, man. I did. I ran it on an average $2 million home in Sydney, right? And the average rental rate in most of those markets in Sydney.
It's crazy that that's an average these days.
100%.
Anyway.
Man, the median house price, which takes obviously all the way out to Penrith and Campbelltown and all the rest of the sort of stuff as well, like the obviously a little bit more blue collar markets out there. The average median house price in Sydney is like almost 1.2 mil now, for including those sorts of markets.
Yeah.
The really interesting thing and the way that I like to look at it is, for the most part, people can't really afford mortgage-wise to live where they really want to live. So most of the time they're sacrificing. They're just buying to the max of what they can buy, but it's not their ultimate home. Now, if it's not their ultimate home, my opinion, I wouldn't be going and buying that house. I'd be trying to invest that would allow me to get in there with profits of the additional amount instead of not even being able to buy it and buying something lackluster.
Yeah.
So running the numbers on a $2 million home, which in the same area, I was doing a bit of research, typically you're renting for about $1,000 or $1,200 a week. If you were to buy that $2 million home at an 80% LVR, so it's a 20% deposit, which most people like to do. For one, it's a $400,000 deposit,
big deposit
plus closing. So you're probably in for about $450 odd sort of money once you take stamp duty and everything into equation as well. If you were to run that at 6.5% interest rate, it's around about $2,500 a week at the moment. Plus, if it was a unit, you got strata, you got council rates, you've obviously got your insurances and maintenance, all that sort of stuff that you have to pay as the actual owner of that property. You're looking at about $2,500 a week just on the mortgage. So the extra stuff, you're probably looking in the high twos. Maybe you clip $3,000 a week over the course of this thing in exchange of renting, which might be $1,000 or $1,200 a week. So you're more than double, if not 2.5, going close to 3 times when it comes to actually ownership of that property compared to what it would cost to rent it.
I guess what we should say here as well. Or firstly, you don't actually own a principal place of residence, do you?
I don't, not anymore.
Yeah, you've just
Practicing what you preach.
practicing what you preach.
100%.
Yes, investing your way to. I can't wait to see what you finally buy. It's gonna be epic.
Yeah. The crazy thing, it keeps leveling up, right? Like you keep changing what you want. And
Yeah.
especially as your portfolio gets bigger and you make more and more, it changes your mindset of what you actually can afford to own as well. So no longer is it like a 1.5 mil in the burbs, it starts going up a bit and then a bit more and a bit more.
Constantly chasing.
100%.
I think what we should caveat here as well is when you're thinking about this rent vesting approach, you're not saying I'm going to live in Double Bay and then rent vest in Wallara. You're actually then looking at, and what you help people do is actually find property with good yield and good return in that $500,000 to $600,000 to $700,000 bracket where you can actually afford to get into the property.
Yeah, and obviously your yields are so they're quite decent at that sort of price point as well, which allows it to service itself to a decent level. If instead you were to go off into a different capital city that might be lower in its cycle, so it hasn't had as much growth, say in the last 10 years, 5-10 years, and then obviously the yields are stronger, lower point in the cycle, can negotiate a better price, and you've got more room for growth, you could build your wealth much more substantially down that avenue than trying to go and buy a blue chip property that has got a terrible yield, is going to bleed you anyway. So it's definitely a much better formula for success on that side.
So we have a friend who lives in Darwin, and he was saying that there's a property there that gets $400 a week rent and is selling for $200,000.
There you go.
So that's a
10%
that's a
yield,
10% rental yield.
rental yield.
So like that's, I guess, the comparison to someone, you know, listening in Brisbane, Sydney, or Melbourne.
They're the
thinking about
extremes.
That
Yeah.
property is half the deposit of the
the average house in Sydney. Yeah. So
Definitely.
if people are conceptualizing like what this looks like, it's like, you know, renting wherever you're living and buying the $200,000 place with maybe a $20,000 or $40,000 deposit rather than a $400,000 deposit, and servicing a $160,000 mortgage rather than a $1.6 million mortgage.
Well, the rent services the mortgage as well, right? So the
True,
rent services the
true,
mortgage
yeah.
plus surplus. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people miss in the equation is it's not like, well, because I can go and buy $2 million worth of primary residence, that's all I can do from investing. The investing can go so much further because you have that rental income coming in as well. So if you build the portfolio out correctly, your actual cost or your running cost of this thing should be next to zero. Initially, it might be a little bit, but you can definitely build a portfolio that takes care of itself, and then the growth comes through, and obviously that's where you can make your serious profits on.
So for someone who's not interested in growing a 54 property portfolio,
Yeah, so some for the rest of us.
the majority of people.
but has is in a position to service a loan, but perhaps not in the area that they want right now.
Yeah.
How does this strategy help people actually get to that point in buying a principal place of residence in their favorite suburb?
Yeah, man, this is the biggest thing I love about it, because when I look at what I could afford back in the day, I could afford like a maybe $700,000-$800,000 property at most. But you accumulate, let's say, $1-2 million worth of property, and it goes through a decent cycle. It's saying a 5-10, even just, in my opinion, underperforming in 10 years, that 2 million doubles to 4 million, and then that's your profit. Like from that end, all of a sudden I was only able to buy a $700,000 property. And yes, there's growth across the board, right? But now I've just banked $2 million plus whatever I put into it that I can come out. And yes, you pay a little bit of tax, but capital gains tax exemptions and whatnot are obviously within Australia. If you own a property for over 12 months, there's a lot of different things that we can, profit, and you break them down, sell them in different years. So your profit, you can minimize your tax in a pretty effective way. I think there's like a lot of the time there's like multiple ways of looking at rent vesting, and some people want to do it purely to be able to get themselves into their primary residence. And so you might go out there and build a foundation of investments, and depending on your income level, maybe you go towards $2-3 million worth of growth properties, and that's all you go in for. $2 million is worth of exposure in the market is 4 properties at 500, or 3 mil is 5 properties at 600. It's a very sort of replicatable sort of thing, and you can do it in any sort of deposit amount as well. So if you have a smaller amount of deposit, just enter a lower price pointed market. A lot of the time, your lower price pointed market will also have stronger yields. So if you've got a lower deposit, you might be a lower income earner. That retains your serviceability and allows you to kind of keep moving forward and getting into the next one as well. So it's always different. And some people will do it purely to build out a passive income, and then some people will do it as the hybrid.
It's something I wish I had known about when I got my first post-uni job. And it was like property seemed like such a far away goal. And thinking about needing enough for a deposit and all of that. And then also just feeling like every year I was falling further and further behind where I needed to be to buy that property.
Yeah.
Whereas if I had changed my mindset, well, if I'd known about this and had been like, what can I get now? And let's just do it and service like a $150,000 mortgage. It would have just changed. I would have changed the way I invested. May not have invested in the stock market.
Yeah.
Probably still.
Well,
Could have done both, I guess, is kind of the point.
definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is the thing, man. I look back on my journey, and I don't really understand stocks that much because I didn't put the time into it. The ability for someone like me, I was a low income earner. I didn't have much of a deposit. And I know you want to talk about recycling equity in a second, but like that's where that leverage point, because I was such a low income earner, that leverage point of being able to strip equity back out and go and buy another deal, that was the game changer for me in being able to continue to scale the portfolio.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.